Hello, I'm Myah Jones from 3rd period.
And I'm Sofia Goulart from 2nd period.
And this is our final project. You know, I write fanfiction.
You said you want to talk about this. We talked about this before.
It's part of what's
No, it's part of it. This is a school project, Myah. God. Right here is best-selling YA novel Children of Blood and Bone by Toni Adeyemi.
This book takes place in the magical world of Orisha, where the Magi are persecuted for their culture and their heritage.
And royalty reigns supreme over all of Orisha's inhabitants. Toni Adeyemi's first novel, Children of Blood and Bone, illustrates cultural and Marxist conflicts through the world and characters of Orisha, which reflects on Adeyemi's own personal experiences and education. Our author is Toni Adeyemi. From Goodreads.com here, we can see that after graduating Harvard University with an honors degree in English literature, she received a fellowship that allowed her to study West African mythology and culture in Salvador, Brazil. Now, if we use the cultural lens, we can see that Toni Adeyemi's rich education in West African mythology and culture shines through in the deep, thoughtful world she creates with Orisha. This cultural background and her own personal experience as a woman of color shapes the way she sees her story and creates her world. Now, using the cultural lens to look at the content of the story itself, this first excerpt takes on a new power when we're analyzing it. I focus on the way my bare feet drive against the reed of Mama Agba's floor, testing the friction I'll need to win this match and finally graduate. When I reach the black mat that marks the arena, Yemi is the first to bow. She waits for me to do the same, but her gaze only stokes the fire in my core. There is no respect in her stance, no promise of a proper fight. She thinks because I'm a diviner, I am beneath her. She thinks I'm going to lose. In this world, the world of Orisha, one can be born as a diviner, which is someone with magic in their blood. These people are often looked down upon by those around them because of Orisha's history. Because of Zeli's culture and heritage of being a diviner, her opponent in this opening match of the book is choosing to underestimate her power and her abilities.
It'll be worse. It's like down to my knees. Sorry. Brief recess. Diving right back in. On page 36, Amari being the narrator. Her mother says, Samara, have I mentioned how regal you look today? I bite my tongue and drain the rest of my tea. Though mother says regal, the words lighter hide behind her lips. Like the regals who can proudly trace their lineage back to the royal families who first wore Orisha's crown, lighter is more desired. Now here we can see within the culture of Orisha, and even among the upper class, colorism is still prevalent. Lighter skin is seen as more royal, more desirable. This is because people with darker skin were often magi. In the culture curated by the king, magic is outlawed and thought to be exterminated. Therefore, having any resemblance to the culture of magi makes you an outcast and less than. And that is what Amari experiences, even within her own family and by her mother.
Now, here we have the second book in her series, Children of Virtue and Vengeance, where the story of Orisha continues. Now, they are in the middle of a very bloody and brutal war for the crown and for the heart of all Orisha. In this scene, Amari is imposing on a cultural ceremony done by magi in order to try and gain power because she sees herself as superior to the common people. Ziel is talking... Ziel says, how can you fight for this when you don't even know anything about the Magi at all? To which Amari replies, you may not have to concern yourself with the war, but as queen, I don't have a choice. Amari is assuming that she's the only one who can save Orisha because she is royal and from a higher class. She's also doing this and imposing herself onto a cultural practice of the Magi in order to gain power.
We can also see class divide in the first book, Children of Blood and Bone. Trout, a man shrieks. Do I look like I eat trout? I turn to the plump noble clad in dark purple. He narrows his eyes at the custodian, merchant, like he has just received a grave insult. I said I want swordfish, the noble snaps. My servant says you refuse to sell it. The merchant replies, if a swordfish is caught, it goes straight to the palace. That's the law of the land. Now, this reveals distinct levels and differences among the different classes in the land of Orisha. The custodian make up most of the working class, as they have been hunted and killed for years and remain the marginalized group, as they are often the magi. Therefore, they are left to work the tedious, demanding jobs within the city. Example, the merchants of the busy streets. This is contrasted by the nobleman, who clearly has more money and status among the people. He is plump and well-fed, and is dressed nicely in purple, a color of power and status. And he has servants, which means he can afford a lot of help. However, within this obvious privilege the noble have over the working custodian, it still does not rival the ultimate power of the monarchy, as everything is prioritized for them. This displays the level of power and how money and status affects the lives of the different people, and how there is levels, being the working, the noble, and then the monarchy class.
Very well said, Myah.
Thank you.
And this book teaches us that we can look at fantasy novels even, and we didn't do a counterclaim. Some people may say that fantasy novels where there is a magic and mystical creatures can't hold any bearing in the real world. But we can see through this book that that is not correct. Because even though there are fantasy creatures and magic and mystical things, we can draw very clear parallels to things that happen in our own world to this very day.
Whether that be class struggles, whether that be issues of colorism, whether that be cultures being impeded, we can see all of these things within this fantastical world in our everyday lives. And that's important to remember.
It is.
So, in brief, I give this book a 5 out of 5 on Goodreads, and I think it deserves all the hype.
Yes. And we urge you, the reader, the listener, to realize that even though books are fantasy, you can use their plots and their characters and their settings and draw parallels to real life problems and be able to think about them more critically.
So next time you open a good book, think, is it a story or is it real life? I'm Myah.
I'm Sofia. And this was our
this was our final project. Thank you. I'm sorry, Miss DeLaCruz. That's a wrap.